Hello and welcome to the SEGA Nerdcast, episode 95. I am Chris, the editor of SEGA Nerds, and with me this week is Kopke. We also
Hello,
have Donnie,
everyone.
who's joining us for the very first time as a staff member. Congratulations, Donnie, and welcome
Thank
aboard.
you. Oh, thank you.
It's good to have you here.
Yeah, I gotta get used to hearing Donnie from SEGA Nerds now instead of Donnie from Sonic Paradox or TSSE. But I see someone from TSSE is here though.
That's right. We have Tristan from TSSZ, our good friend Tristan. How's it going, buddy?
Hi. I should know, Donnie is still writing for us, right?
Yeah.
You haven't completely stolen him.
Yeah,
No, that's what I was going to say. Is Donnie is
I was making a
he's
segue.
all over the place these days. I mean,
He is. And it is absolutely well deserved. So
That's right. We've really been impressed with your work, Donnie, for a long time now. You've definitely been at the forefront of a lot of news stories and everything else. So we look forward to and that's the thing, really. I mean, we're all about just making sure the Sega news gets covered the right way, as objectively and unbiased as possible. That's what we're about, and that's what we want. And I appreciate the work you put in.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I do have to give credit to you guys though, because you've been a really big help for getting SEGA news out as well. And a lot of some of the good portion of the articles that I wrote sourced you guys. And I know you guys source a lot of work too, but I noticed that you guys make articles about stuff that no one else really does. I mean, and I have to give you props for that. It's always those who are able to get the news out in a way that no one can and make their site their own thing. Those are the ones that shine most of all out of all the media sites. So
Yeah,
I'm really glad to join you guys, and I can't wait to contribute as much as I can.
Awesome.
Welcome aboard.
We promise this won't be a massive circle jerk the entire time. So, but no, we do have we have a really great show. At least I hope we do. But this is the first episode of the Nerdcast for 2016. We're going to be talking about a lot of stuff that is.
I want to say something. This is the first time Tristan has joined the show that there is not a crisis on Sega.
That is true. Usually, I would say
give
this
it
is
time.
usually when Tristan comes on, it's a bad thing. Something really bad's happened.
I am the Grim Reaper. Terrific.
That's right. But this is one of the rare instances where really it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's an interesting thing because,
Yes.
Tristan, you've been publishing a lot of stories that have been coming out recently, and we'll get into that. But we're going to be, like I was saying before, this show is going to be basically looking ahead at 2016. We're going to be looking at
Yes.
what Sega needs to do to rebound from last year, because I think we can all sit here and say that, and I think a lot of people even at Sega would say that last year wasn't one of their best years. It was
Yeah.
pretty tough for Sega, all across the world, not just here in the United States or Japan. We're going to look at what we hope Sega is going to be showing at E3 this year.
If they go.
If they go, what the biggest news story of 2015 was. So we'll look back a little bit, and we'll round up some other stuff here and there. So I think it's gonna be a great show. But before we get into all that, let's go back to you, Tristan. So can you talk to us a little bit about how this series of stories began, and kind of give an overview of what you've been publishing, the past week or so?
So basically, I got an email a couple of weeks ago. I've been, I get an email from this person from time to time. This is somebody who I have used in the past. And actually, when Donnie came on last year, kind of knowing that, these things could creep up from time to time, things that, have to be sourced to somebody anonymous. That's still something where I take the lead on, because I am perfectly fine falling on my sword if these things turn out to be total BS. So we got, and really, there was a little bit of editing on my part too, because I got a lot of information, and I in fact did not publish all of that information. I published really 5 stories that detailed that I thought would be of most interest to our readers. The first one concerned Shenmue. The second one concerned Bayonetta. The third one, I want to say, was Sonic. The fourth one concerned Phantasy Star Online, and the fifth one is actually getting more traction now, sort of long-term than some of the other ones, concerns Sega's PC plans for 2016 and probably the years ahead. We did it 5 stories, 5 articles. I had the time to do it. I'm on my holiday break, so it was a good time to kind of get it all together. A lot of people think that I just kind of publish these things willy-nilly, and I really don't. I actually had a fair amount of follow-up questions to ask the source about some of the information. And, I did get responses. I got responses that I think were, good to kind of assuage some of my concerns with publishing the information. So, bada bing. Now it's published. And it's, a lot of people have read it. Certainly a lot of people have also disputed some of it or have said, oh, this is obvious. Well, that is certainly within everybody's right to do. I present information. I try and vet it as best as possible. I think you saw that actually with the 4th article, the best with Phantasy Star Online 2. That required some additional research. And I actually think the PSO2 article and the Shenmue one probably is sort of the most ironclad of the bunch, I would say. The Sonic one, I think, was a little bit more obvious. But we ran with it anyway because I think the prospect of a second Sonic Team title beyond what is almost certainly going to be the quote-unquote anniversary one, that was certainly interesting. But for those who are watching right now and think that I make this stuff up, no, I don't. And like I said, this is my sword to fall on. This is not something that I would hand off to Donnie or Lewis or anybody else on staff. It's something that, if it's wrong, I am totally fine weathering the storm with it, but I don't want the rest of the team to, to have to deal with that if it came to that. So, it does happen from time to time. It's been a while since I've heard from this source, but I have heard from this source in the past. The source has not always been spot on, but most of the time he has. So I consider him reliable. I consider him a good source. So that's why we went ahead with publication.
What has this source? What has he done or he or she done? I guess in the past to give you the confidence that they're trustworthy.
So I'll give you one. In 2013, we actually ran another Phantasy Star Online 2 story from this same source. And that source told me the game was fully localized in English. At the time, he didn't have an exact reason for the decision. This go around, he did. And in this case, it was the idea that there's a contract that's preventing Sega from publishing Phantasy Star Online 2 to Steam. Now, I've gotten some pushback with that and saying, well, you don't necessarily need Steam to put out a game to PC, and that is true. However, Steam, far and away, is Sega's primary distribution method for PC games in the West. Without it, there's basically no good way for Sega to get its product out there. So, let me see if I can pull up some other stuff too. So you have the one.
I thought that was an interesting. I thought that was an interesting story, just because of the fact that if true, it begs the question of why would Sega make that deal? To begin with, because in my opinion, looking at that, if it in fact was true, then Sega sees a bigger value in Asia, outside of Japan, for PSO2 than in the United States and Europe. If they
Well,
made that deal, right?
I mean, I think
Or,
there are
or,
some other
or they
things.
are,
I
or
think
they
there are
were
some
really
other
in need
things
of
to
money.
consider too.
Sorry.
No, sorry. Go ahead, Kopke. I've been talking forever. Please. Go
Or
ahead.
the other part was that Sega was in a real need for money during the past year, so that maybe that was it. That there was a fair amount, and they agreed because of the amount.
I mean, there is the financial aspect of it, and I think all of us are aware of that. Sega's finances are not as good as they'd like them to be. So, could there be a cost? Could they have done a cost benefit analysis and determined that something that requires as much support as PSO2 and as much infrastructure, and frankly as many tie-ins, and as there are some things like with Shenmue that can fly over in Japan because they have the manpower, they have the support, that to do coding changes and things like that that may not necessarily work with a skeleton or next to skeleton crew in the West. I mean, these things do cost money, so there is that aspect of it potentially. But I just think that's a given. I think the other thing to consider is, sort of the philosophy of Japan versus the West. Sega traditionally, the divisions have been, frankly, divided. So if Sega Japan wants to do something one way that screws the Western divisions, they're probably going to do it, and they're probably not going to think much of it. So, and I think that's a little bit what comes to the idea of this contract with who we believe is with Gamania Entertainment, which is the distributor of PSO2 in Taiwan and Hong Kong and a couple of other Chinese territories, who we believe signed this contract with Sega Japan that basically prevented the Steam release. So business contract law can be very weird and very kind of wacky sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't make sense to us as gamers, as observers, but sometimes that's just business. And if you get into a bad contract, guess what? You still have to honor that contract. And I should note the idea of researching who this company may be. My source did not actually say who the company was. That was something I actually had to go and research and kind of put some pieces together and look at all of the different distributors. There are a couple for Southeast Asia's Phantasy Star Online 2 rollout, and when we looked up Gamania and looked up the very heavy push that they put toward PSO2, then things started to make sense a little bit.
Yeah, like I said, this is definitely an interesting story. Has your going back to your source again, and obviously, without giving too much information or anything like that up, we're not asking you to try to name the source or anything like that. But has the source told you any sort of at what level they're associated with Sega? Do they, have they mentioned if they're an employee, a current employee, a former employee? Did they say, hey, this is how I know this information, and this is why this information is credible?
I will tell you, because I have not heard from this source in a while, but when I did on this latest go, he told me he is now former employee. So my gut tells me I'm probably not going to get a lot of info from him going forward. I want to quickly go back to citing, you asked earlier about how good is this source. In 2012, this source told me in April that they were exploring a Sonic reboot for 2014, and we ran with it in April 2012. And guess what happened in 2014?
Sonic Boom.
Yes, and it was pretty much a total reboot. And at the time, because I'm looking at the article now, he told me, quote, potentially massive and total reboot. This was in 2012. Anything and everything was under review about this reboot. And obviously we saw with Sonic Boom significant design changes, a significant change to the gameplay dynamic of Boom with the Enter Beams, excuse me. And, on that, he was spot on. So he has a good track record. He does not have a perfect track record, but he has a good track record to a point where I feel comfortable publishing the things that he tells me with a little bit of research and a little bit of back and forth question and answer. Can you clarify this? Can you explain why this may not make sense to me in the context of something else, for example? So one of the things actually I'll reveal on this podcast exclusively that I did not write is that he told me that basically SEGA is done with the layoffs in its entertainment division. In its consumer business, obviously, and we'll get to the restructuring, I'm sure, later. There was a restructuring. Divisions were kind of shuffled around a little bit under different division names, etc. He now believes that is done. I did not publish that because, honestly, I look at Sega stock, it's at a multi-year low. I look at some of the information that Sega Sammy has released about adjusting some of their financial figures down, understanding that a lot of that now is on the burden of the pachinko and the patchy slot division now, and not so much on what we used to know as consumer business.
Right.
But, things change in business. You never know when you're going to have a catastrophic event or something that you think is going to do really well suddenly not go very well. So I wasn't really comfortable saying, hey guys, everything's fine now at Sega, because I look at what's happened at Sega West, I look at some of the releases from Sega Sammy, and that part didn't really add up. And I'm still kind of waiting to hear a little bit on clarification on that, and I may not even go forward with something like that as a statement of fact on the site, just because on that respect it doesn't really add up.
And kind of to kind of expand on that whole thing you were saying, exactly. I mean, business is business. And the bottom line is, when a business needs to cut costs, it's always people first. So to say that there's not going to be any more layoffs is a little presumptuous, because we just don't know how Sega's going to be next year. And you made a good point about how Sega Sammy is really leaning on the pachinko side of things. One of the things that Kopke and I were discussing earlier is that there's been an ongoing movement in Japan to try to pass laws that would allow
casinos,
right, to allow pachinko companies to operate as casinos, to legalize gambling in Japan, which would, for especially the big pachinko players in Japan, like Sega Sammy, would allow them to operate a lot more freely, and it would greatly expand the amount of business that they'd be able to do.
Which also adds to other parts, because Sega in the recent years, like 2013 and 14, has been investing heavily on new casinos in other parts of Asia, and it makes a lot of sense. That
I think they opened one in Macau, I believe.
Sorry?
Long ago. I think they opened a big one in Macau.
Yes.
A year or two ago. But
and
the Japanese
one in
government,
South Korea. Sorry.
That's okay. The Japanese government, they were expected to be able to vote on that, and
April.
The expectation was that they were going to pass it in late this past year, like in November. They decided not to vote on it, so that was not passed into law. So a lot of the pachinko makers out there are really concerned, because their business has been declining very steadily. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Japanese government is going to do as it relates to getting these laws passed, and how that's going to affect Sega Sammy's pachinko division.
And to add up to that story, the final decision on that vote will be in April this year. So I guess we won't know how exactly it affects it directly until that month happens.
Yeah. So.
Oh, right around my birthday. Oh boy.
Now, just one other topic I want to kind of get to before we move on to the other stuff. So I think the last story that you published was about the potential Sega PC releases, right, Tristan?
That is correct.
Okay, so that's an interesting thing, and like you said, some of this stuff wasn't, necessarily surprising. It's stuff that we expected, but it's also confirming some of our suspicions and expectations. How solid do you think this piece is?
I wouldn't put it on the same level as PSO2, but I don't think it's total junk. I think when Sonic Lost World was released to PC on a bit of a surprise, I think to a lot of people, I think if you recall, Sega Europe had a release and said this would be the first of many. Now, Sonic Lost World, to my understanding from the source, sold way below expectations. And the expectations were not really that high to begin with. That said, the sources told me that's not going to deter from their PC strategy. And the way I kind of see it is they probably have the same team in Europe that dealt with Lost World that's probably working on a couple of these other titles. I imagine the first-party stuff is going to come first. So if you're looking for a Vanquish, which I know I cited by name in the story, I would probably put maybe Project Diva or Virtua Fighter 5 above Vanquish in terms of a priority. And I want to be clear about this. Just because the story says high priority, like we said, anything can change. I think actually in an earlier story, Sonic Colors was also on that high priority list, and Sonic Unleashed actually is sort of there. My source says there's some debate on whether they want to port that to PC at all, whether they just want to kind of be done with it for one reason or another. So, things change. They have a lot of the library that they can draw back upon. I think Lost World was kind of an out-of-left-field choice. It kind of took a lot of us by surprise. So now that some of these other titles are starting to creep up, like the desire, for example, to port Yakuza, our story states that they want to start with Yakuza 0 and potentially go in order and establish it as a PC franchise on top of what has already happened on the PlayStation. So there's, is it ironclad? I'm not going to say it's ironclad. I am going to say that Sega's PC strategy, my source says, is a major part of what they want to do in 2016 and beyond.
Interesting. So is this it as far as stories? Or do you have any other stories based on this source coming up?
Nope. This is it. 5 stories, 5 articles. I actually asked a little bit about Sonic Boom, but there wasn't really anything in there that I felt was worthy of publication. So, I've been doing my due diligence. I've been, doing the best that I can, and but I think the 5 that we had Shenmue, then we had Bayonetta, we had the Sonic story, we had the PSO2, and then we had the PC lineup, and I think, I think that's pretty good. It's pretty good for a week off, I would say.
It certainly,
definitely is.
It certainly has been making up for the drought we've had in news for the past year. Because we were having a tough time with news on TSSZ for a long time last year, and I'm seeing it's like the giant has been woken up again because of all this. So.
Yeah, and I think that actually leads us pretty well into our next segment. And so basically what we're going to do is we just came up with a lot of interesting topics that we think are relevant to this point in time where we are kind of looking ahead. But before we do that, let's just look back and talk about each one of ours, in our opinion, what the biggest Sega story of 2015 was. So Tristan, I'll let you go ahead and go first. What do you think?
It's by far Shenmue 3, and I think it's really weird because it's not really officially a Sega story. It's, somehow Yu Suzuki got the rights back. You have 2 Guinness World Records, the fastest, the fastest to hit $1 million on Kickstarter, and then probably the most successful gaming Kickstarter. It's really a sight to behold. And you juxtapose that with what was kind of a nothing year for Sega in general, unless you're really into like Hatsune Miku or you're really into some of the games overseas. Shenmue 3, I think that announcement and Sony's involvement did a very good job of trying to revitalize the Shenmue fan base and the Sega fan base. But I think there's a very high standard of proof now. You have literally tens of thousands of backers who have poured in millions of dollars. And though we assume that this Shibuya Productions is going to foot the rest of the bill, the fact of the matter is I consider Shibuya rather unproven. A lot of their works, animation, games, whatever, are still like in development. They're still kind of proof of concept. They're ideas. None of them, to my knowledge, and I'm sure somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, have gotten to the finish line.
And actually, Astro Boy has.
Astro Boy did?
Astro Boy already has a trailer and already has a release date.
So it's close. It's not quite there.
But it's not real. It's not real yet.
It's not. Yeah, that's kind of my point. It's about like 3/4 of the way, and that's a good sign. But Shibuya Productions is largely unproven. This game needs to be proven, or a lot of people are going to be very angry. And I know that they've shown some of the I know they've shown some of like the 20-second trailers sometimes for Shenmue 3 that are just like environments and stuff. That's going to be nice for like a couple more months, and then I think a lot of people are going to want to see a lot more.
Yeah, I think one of the big things surrounding Copy. I'm sorry, I'll let you get to that in a second. I just wanted to say this piece and I'll let you talk. Sure. But one of the things about this story that I think a lot of people don't really talk a lot about is about, in my opinion, you could call it the mismanagement of the Kickstarter, especially early on. By the team running it, is because I think if they had managed this Kickstarter properly from beginning to end, I think they could have ended up with a lot more money than they did. I think letting so much misinformation go unchecked early on into the Kickstarter campaign really hurt it very, very badly. A lot of negative opinion came out after Sony's announcement. People felt that Sony was going to be publishing the game, that they're footing a lot of the bill, so why does Yu Suzuki and his team need to go to Kickstarter to help fund this game? They thought, if Sony's going to go ahead and publish it anyway, why do I need to go and give them money now when this game is going to go ahead and be made no matter what? And that's what it was. And it took a long time before they came out and said, wait, no, Sony's not giving us all this money. They're partnering with us, but they never came out and set the record straight, laid out all the information to give people more confidence into contributing to this campaign. And I think that is one side of the story that doesn't get enough news or attention. And it sucks, but I think that they could have done a lot better if they managed it more properly.
Yes, I agree to that. Also, to be fair, most of the people who contributed to this Kickstarter are hardcore fans of the series. Yeah. And they also have stated a lot that they don't care if they don't get like a high-resolution quality game. They care more about continuing the story and getting to know what's going on next. And I think that would be fair if the game realizes to accomplish that. And Yu Suzuki already has addressed a lot of times that, hey, we're sorry, we're going to make a game that we can with this budget. So don't expect like huge graphics or stuff like that, but expect a good gaming gameplay. And I think that Yu Suzuki can deliver that even with less money in terms of that. I think he's gonna have trouble with things like localization, like voice, like recording, or even like high-res video. But aside from that, I think Yu Suzuki is a very capable person of delivering an experience.
Didn't someone donate like a good 10K within the first few hours of the
Well, and
Kickstarter being live?
that's another thing I was going to say is when they released the leather jacket, I think that was a $10,000
There was
level.
a troll.
And then there was a couple other ones. So what they ended up doing, there was a leather jacket, and there was another. I think there was two that were like a $5,000 pledge. Or it was the dinner with Yu Suzuki, and I think that might have been $5,000 or something like that. So at the the last few minutes of the campaign, those backers backed out, and so no one ended up buying the leather jacket. And I think the same thing with the dinner with Yu Suzuki. One of the things I was thinking, I think Kickstarter should do to rectify that is offer companies that are creating the campaign and pushing it a couple different pledge levels that at their highest tier, if you decide as a voter or as someone that's going to be backing this campaign, if you decide you want that, then it charges you automatically and you're locked into it. And you can't back out because there's lots of times where people do things like this, where they secure, some sort of, highly exclusive pledge level, and then they back out the last minute, or their card doesn't go through because obviously they don't have $10,000, and that really hurts both, the company that's trying to get this stuff made, and also other people who would like to get that item and have the money to be able to do it. So I think Kickstarter also needs to look into how it's managing some of these higher-end reward levels, and I think they could do a better job of that as well.
I mean, it's absolutely disgraceful, I think, the folks who back out at the last second and pledge, like, insane amounts of money. It's like, this thing is going to get funded. Why would you jerk the chain of tens of thousands of people whose money is good, and yet you want to be the dick who wants to kind of claim the leather jacket for his or herself until like 2 seconds before the damn thing is over. It's absolutely disgraceful. I have kickstarted a couple projects. Generally my experience has been good with it. I've even kickstarted a couple of fan projects, within the community. What's the one that? What's the one that the Sonic Before the Sequel person? Spark the Electric Jester.
Okay.
Spark the Electric Jester. I mean, I backed that. But if whoever's watching this and wants to be a dick on Kickstarter like that, please don't.
Very good. Donnie, what is your biggest story of 2015?
It had to be the SEGA restructure that happened around this time last year, actually. I think this is the 1-year anniversary coming up on the 30th. And that story alone, I thought, okay, this is probably going to be a long-term thing. We probably will see the results of this for, consequences of this for the next few months or so. But it turned out that the whole year was basically defined by that one story, that one action that SEGA did, where they just basically decided to get their act together and restructure, and there was the layoffs and all that, and pretty much every action that they did, during those 12 months, basically goes back to that restructure and what they did at that instant, and it defined a year ultimately, and that's why I think that it was a top story for me. Not really. Shenmue 3 was definitely huge, and that was, I think, the runner-up for me was Shenmue 3. But the SEGA restructure, if we're going with the top SEGA stories, that really did define SEGA's year right there. And like I said, a lot of what SEGA did during that year was credited to that restructure. And it really is unfortunate that the layoffs happened, and it's unfortunate, that they had to make all those, migrations to different. They had to relocate. But if it means them continuing as a business, and it means them sticking around and being able to put out games and stuff like that, you gotta do what you gotta do. It's business. So, I mean, but
and it sucks because we lost a lot of longtime community managers as well. I mean, Julian has been there I think he's one of the longest tenured community managers at Sega. He'd been there for like 8 years or something like that, maybe longer.
Yeah, we lost Kelly too.
That's what I was gonna say. We lost Kelly, and so it was a bummer. I mean, Stephen Frost also, we lost him, who was a great, great member of Sega, but also just a very, you talk to him and you get it, and you know that this guy is not only an avid, lover of video games, but also Sega. I mean, he former editor of Official Dreamcast magazine, dating way back then. I mean, this guy's been around for a long time. And just to see his kind of tenure at Sega end like that was kind of sad. So that was definitely, I mean, I totally agree. That was a huge, huge story that, is still, affecting Sega today.
Yeah.
So, Kopke, what about you, buddy? What does
I think the biggest two ones were already said. And, well, I just want to share a poll we did recently on the site. Let me just screen share.
That reminds me, I have to make a new poll for TSZ in the next few days.
Yes, if you're wondering, I'm not back permanently on the site. I do what I do, and I write when I can. So for those, Donnie will be back. It'll be back to normal next week. I promise.
This was basically the stories that had the most clicks during the year in the site. And as we can see, we have Shenmue, like Western PSO 2 requests, like they happen all year. We had a lot of Sega hardware stuff. Sonic Boom was talked a lot, even for good or for bad. Also there were a lot of Sega titles released by fans, like fans translations, stuff like that. Obviously, the Sega restructure was a big thing, and there was also a lot of feedback regarding the Sega 3D Classics. Those were actually the ones that had the most clicks on our site. Like, a lot of people were into this and talking about this. But obviously, Shenmue was one that stand out the most.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that Sonic Boom, even though it was released in 2014, it was still such a like a polarizing topic that it still it still divides Sega fans today.
But I think it's polarizing to both ends of it, because I think if you speak to anybody, well versed in the Boom Initiative, they would probably tell you the game franchise was terrible, but the cartoon series was actually quite good.
And precisely, we were talking, Chris and I were talking in the morning about that, because it is funny that a similar strategy happened in Japan with Hero Bank. Like, it was exactly the same process, and both series came at the exact same time. Like, Sega invested in this triple bundle, like cartoon, merchandise, and game, and both ended up having almost the same results. Like, the cartoon was really successful, the merchandising was selling, but the game did not sell well. The only difference was that Hero Bank was not bugged as Sonic Boom and did have like high scores in the reviews.
That game really looked good.
Yeah.
Kopke, you know me. I mean, I was really hoping for that game. That was one of the the newest Sega IPs that I thought had the most potential in a long time, and it's just a bummer to see how it ended up. And I don't see us getting more Hero Bank, even in Japan.
Actually, what hurts most is that it is another IP that's done by Nagoshi besides Yakuza. They don't give him that much time to do another creative thing besides that these days. So it was really sad that it didn't have the response.
Maybe it'll live on in the Yakuza franchise. He likes to do that sometimes. Maybe you'll move to some arcade or something like that, and you can play Hero Bank, or maybe you'll see a Hero Bank characters running down the street somewhere. That would be pretty funny. Even though it would not at all work in the timeline of events, being that Yakuza 0 is going to be set in the past, and Hero Bank obviously is this year. So those are all three really big stories. You guys don't really give me a lot to pick from, unless I just want to pick one of yours. But I would say the Sega beginning the PC ports and continuing that and kind of piggybacking on the story that we talked a little about earlier. But I think that this is just a very, very smart move on Sega's part, because they're no longer having to pick and choose a certain platform from the console standpoint and get behind that. The PC has such a large user base out there. It's so big. Porting these games to PC is relatively cheap. You don't have to run into a lot of the same licensing fees that you do with the console manufacturers, especially when you're talking about updating your games and things like that. So the cost associated with porting it is going to be a lot lower. The upside's a lot higher. I think this is a very smart move for Sega, and I hope that they continue to do this. And by the looks of it, they will. And I think that it's going to be very, very smart if this is going to be a big pillar of their strategy moving forward, combined with the mobile stuff. PC mobile with a far more limited scope on like handheld and console going forward is the way I foresee Sega doing it. But I think porting stuff to PC, porting new games to PC, making sure those are continuing to go there on Steam is going to be a big part of Sega going forward, and it's going to be huge for them.
It's a very low risk and potentially high reward situation, especially if they can do it with, a skeleton or next to skeleton crew like they did with Lost World in Europe. It doesn't necessarily have to sell that well. But if you can get like 10,000, 20,000 people paying $30 for a title on Steam, I mean, you potentially have paid that staff on one game for the year and then some. So, it's just a matter of, how fast can they churn them out. Obviously we want the titles to be of a good quality. We don't want this to just be like a slop shoot, but if they do it right, there is enormous upside potential.
Yeah, basically with the PC ports is if ain't broke, don't fix it, and they should continue that way. Also, what's good from the PC games that Sega's been publishing, Sega of Europe is being publishing, is they are really low cost on publishing, and marketing really has a lot of share of the investment when releasing these games. And this platform, Steam, allows them to reach many countries and delivers and avoid some things like distribution, like heavy marketing, or like the publishing costs on platforms that they have to do on consoles and stuff like that. So it's very profitable for them.
I think another thing that's really helpful for the PC ports is that they have with Steam, there's already a ton of people that have Steam. So they already have a vast user base right there ready and willing, to get whatever good titles they can get from Sega that Sega puts out. And it's not compared to like the Wii U, where the Wii U had been struggling for so long, and I think it still kind of is, as far as I know, because I've heard it only just recently passed the Dreamcast sales. So I don't really see the problem putting out games on PC imports, because
I think the main benefit from this is that you don't have to divide your audience. Like, there were people like, most of the people complain why this game is not on Xbox One, or why this is not on PlayStation Network and stuff like that. With the PC, you're giving everyone the chance to play all your games in a single platform, and I think that's the major benefit from Sega doing this.
And also to do it in a way that basically they can just turn the whole thing up. You can have 60 frames a second. You can have ultra mega high resolution. You can have 4K if you want. I mean, they can play it the way they want to play it, and that is important.
Yeah, I'd say that PC is perhaps even maybe on par, even more with the specs compared to consoles. So there's a lot they can work with.
And also, most of the flaws like people can complain of are not Sega won't be responsible of that. Like for example, the game is running slow. No, that will be like a mistake happening from the specs from the consumer. not Sega, like not using a PlayStation processor correctly. So I think that's a major benefit, especially with a lot of people complaining in the internet.
Yeah, it allows Sega to kind of make arguments that are more towards, check your specs or whatever, or, check your computer and see if there's anything malfunctioning. Like they can say that for these ports compared to the Wii U where you really can't do that. If something went wrong with the game, it's not you, it's the game. So there's a lot of pluses to PC porting, but I'm glad to see they are not abandoning consoles. Yeah.
You gotta spec yourself before you wreck yourself.
Oh God.
I'm trademarking that, by the way.
So if you guys were on Facebook the last couple of weeks, I think a lot of general websites, entertainment websites out there would have you believe that the biggest Sega news coming out of 2015 would be that Sega was going to be making the Dreamcast 2. So that came out late, like a couple days, pretty much the week of Christmas. And so what ended up happening, and we want to just get into this really quickly before we move on, for those that may have heard of it and just don't know kind of the gist of the story, is several months ago, a guy named Ben Plato started a petition on Change.org to try to get Sega of America to design and release a new Sega Dreamcast limited edition console. The idea that it would be kind of an updated system. It would have Wi-Fi on board, 4 controllers, 500 gig hard drive. You'd also have a GD-ROM drive, HDMI output, that upscale games to 720 or 1080. And it would also be able to connect to what would be called a Dreamcast Classic Store, where you can download digital Dreamcast games and store them on a hard drive, which sounds completely awesome. Problem is, there's been so many of these same type of petitions over the years that it's just really hard to take them serious. But this one actually has been getting quite a bit of play, and at the time when we wrote our story on the Dreamcast 2 situation, which is just try to kind of cut through a lot of the bullshit to try to get down to the facts and figure out what was going on. It had over 24,000 supporters, and it needs 25,000 people to have signed the petition to be a success. Copy, you're going to say something?
No. It's like, this was kind of weird. Mm-hmm. And also in the way it happened, it was like catastrophic for the community, how things went from that point.
Right, and on December 9th, I mean, up to that point, there wasn't really a lot of news. It was just you'd see people sharing the article on Facebook here and there. Then on December 9th, he posted an update on the Change.org page for the petition that a new company approached him and said that they essentially would want to be the ones to manufacture this system if it was given the green light by Sega. And it looks like this is kind of the impetus that jump-started a lot of what would end up becoming the whole, hey, Sega's making a Dreamcast 2 stuff. So about a week or so later, they launched a website called Project Dream, which had a countdown that was counting down to like the new year, essentially. Had some information and some video behind the countdown that showed some prototype designs on what this Dreamcast 2 would look like. It looks pretty cool, I won't lie. But then they also launched that Project Dream Facebook group, which is really what got things going, because once they got that, people started joining, people started getting really excited about it, and then there was this guy named Patrick Lawson who said that he was essentially the group's public relations coordinator and editor, whatever that means. But he started going around and doing all these interviews with news outlets like Kotaku and tons of other ones. Epic Times, which is a big one, the Cinema Blend article, saying that, hey, we got all these plans to get Sega to get back into the console business. We're going to be launching a Kickstarter in the new year to raise $1 million. Just all this crazy shit that he started saying. and all these companies or all these websites started publishing it and say, hey, Sega's getting back in the console business. There's this group trying to do that. The problem is all this ran completely opposite to what Ben Plateau and the team at Project Dream were actually attempting to do, and it wasn't necessarily to try to do that. It was to try to convince Sega to design a new system. Not necessarily would be get back in the console business. Per se, to try to rival Nintendo and Sony, but it would be to try to create this new system that would essentially just be able to play Dreamcast games.
And I think it got that far because a lot of the gaming press is frankly stupid, and they're and I say this occasionally looking for big headlines myself. They want the big headline, and if your headline, if you have on one hand, group of gamers looking to, looking for spiritual successor to Dreamcast, with Sega's blessing, and on the other hand you have, OMG, Sega's making Dreamcast 2. Guess what? If I'm an editor in December of a major site and I'm looking for page hits, guess which one I'm probably gonna choose. Now that said, I don't think the idea is necessarily bad if they have a little bit of tech to go behind it and they can license the Dreamcast name or maybe some of the technology from Sega, because then you can kind of have a scenario where if it can be done with minimal effort from Sega, think about like all of these kind of retro consoles that are being sold now in stores. Like, some of them have like the 50-in-1 systems.
Retro
those systems. I would not necessarily be opposed to something like that if they can get enough signatures and enough support to Sega to say, hey, there's a market for this. You can make money off licensing your technology to us. Give us a shot because we have a proof of concept. Have them take that to Kickstarter. If they can do it the right way, let's see if the market will support it, and then we can go from there. And then maybe we can get a better library, perhaps, of Dreamcast titles, available. Obviously, I know that is very, very complicated because you're going to have to deal with not just Sega, but probably some third parties as well. But if they think they really have an audience for it, 5 years ago we probably were laughing about Shenmue 3 too, and this past year it happened. So I kind of feel like that's the barometer. At this point, all bets are off. It's a very different ecosystem now. Fans and just people with ideas now have the ability to, get some, get some backing toward it. So why not?
Well, I think the problem with this campaign was not necessarily the intention, but rather how they were proposing this. Like, it sounded pretty unrealistic in many ways. So I think that was.
But is that the creator's fault or is that the press's fault for hyping it up beyond what it was intended to be?
I think it was a little bit of both, because the campaign for a start wasn't like explaining bigger things, like how are they going to upscale those games, like how are they going to build a network so that the games have proper digital distribution, like how are they going to solve certain legal issues with Sega, or if they really had approached them to, start to making this licensed console. It was that kind of a thing. It was more like showing that this was a very amateur way of putting things out. And also the other problem, would you have like this kind of thing that isn't well backed up, and you get like that kind of press, obviously the campaign will go like ending up a total mess. I think it has a lot of faults in this part. I agree with you that there's a huge interest and a huge market that is really hungry for this type of releases. But the problem is that you have to do them right, and you have to like really back up what you're saying in that way. So you're playing with money. You're playing with a lot of people's trust. So you have to do things in a proper way. I think if they instead of launching things like this, like we're saying, like, hey, we have this prototype, it runs and stuff like that. Hey, Sega, can you give us a shot on licensing this thing, and then launch a Kickstarter? And instead of like trying to get their attention this way, would have worked better. Or like they saying explicitly, hey, we have this emulator console, we want to license it. I think the message would have turned out better.
Yeah, and I think kind of going back to what you guys were saying, I think the most likely, if we really want to try to get something done with the Dreamcast, I think the best way to do it is to try to license the Dreamcast technology, the Dreamcast name. Maybe a company like Tomo would be a good one to do that. They're the ones that released the Neo Geo X. They've done it before. They've launched a quality console.
And they also have good partners with Sega.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they've worked licensing stuff with Sega before. They're the ones that released the the Genesis and I think Master System iPhone covers that looked really awesome. We gave away a couple years back. So they've worked with Sega with licensing things in the past. They have connections there. I think that would be a smart move. Maybe the Project Dream folks can approach Tomo and see what they can do with that. But I think that would be the most realistic scenario, that we would get some sort of new Dreamcast system, and I would be completely on board with that. If they needed to go and go to Kickstarter to try to raise some licensing costs and things like that, or whatever it may be, I wouldn't be opposed to that if it was done right.
I think they have three options. Like, for example, licensing to a third party to develop a kind of emulator, like kind of the Retro Freak does, like with your own technology. Like, you provide the blueprints, how the board is done, stuff like that. And the other one is that Sega can actually re-release their own consoles because people are hungry to be able to play this. Like, not many countries were able to get most of them, for example. Like in our case in Latin America, like we weren't able to get the Saturn. So if somebody would sell us, I think a lot of people would be able to. The problem would be the games. Like, they're not available anymore, and you have to pay really high prices for them. And the other ones, like, allowing, like, other companies to, like Sega providing the technology for it, and the other companies, like, manufacturing the things, like what they did with Tectoy. Like, they still release, like, Master Systems and Sega Genesis, but it is actually using like kind of an emulator thing, like kind of a board. I think they can like rethink about this stuff so they can make more money from it.
Right. So it's going to be interesting to see where the Project Dream campaign goes from here. We'll keep an eye on it and see. So good luck to them. We want them. We wish them no ill will, but they definitely had some bad stuff happen with them. And one thing is Patrick Lawson is no longer with the Project Dream, and I'm not even sure if he ever was. So I guess a lot of people are saying that they think that he was the Zach Morris character who's been known to spread a lot of misinformation out there. Patrick Lawson has been messaging me on Facebook endlessly, claiming that he's not Zach Morris. So I just let him keep messaging me. I don't respond to it, but yeah, he has been sending me lots of stuff. So
he's not Tristan's source either, just to clarify.
Yes,
that would be
also Chris, if you could explain
big plot twist.
You could explain something about this Zach Morris thing so that people are aware next time something like this happens.
I didn't even know who this Zach Morris person was until this story came out. So he's come and gone on several different forums, Sega and Sonic specific forums. He's had his own blog, and he's just claimed all these different stories, for a long time now that have, when the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360 were coming out to release, he came out with all these articles about how Sega was planning to get back into the console business and how they were going to be able to undercut both on price but also be more powerful than both Sony and Microsoft systems, and how they were all very concerned and scared because of what Sega was going to do and all this stuff. And obviously it turned out to be a lie. So he's just been known to spread a lot of misinformation. A lot of people have been linking Patrick Lawson to Zach Morris, believing he's the same person. I don't know, and it's just a silly situation. Honestly, I don't care much either.
Basically, people, if you hear about this guy, don't take it as trustworthy information. He's basically a big troll.
It's funny because people usually say that about my stories.
The amount of misinformation has become from this whole Project Dream thing, mostly, the headlines and stuff like that, it's just unfortunate because, like, people will be just as interested in finding out the truth about something as they would for something that was, like, over-exaggerated or, taken out of context. Like, people do want to know the reality of something. Like, if there's no BSing them. So I mean, it just stinks that it just all came together with this one story.
All right, let's moving on. Let's talk about what Sega needs to do in 2016 to rebound from last year. Obviously, Sega had a rough year, both in terms of just the financial side of it, but also in looking at the games it released. I mean, back in, I think it was 2013, Sega released almost 40 to 50 games. I mean, there were tons of games, both on like PC, there was mobile, there was console, handheld. Across every platform, Sega was releasing a lot of content. Fast forward to 2015, those releases dwindled by a lot. We got a few mobile games. If it wasn't for this 3D classics, Sega really didn't release a whole lot, especially if you take out Atlas games from that list of releases. You're talking about maybe less than 10 or so games that Sega released the whole year that was actually developed by them. So, looking at that and looking ahead, what does Sega need to do to be successful both financially and kind of on the creative side this year?
Well, first, I think they need to get the Sonic 25th anniversary right. And that has to be the priority, just across the board for this year. I mean, we're going to have Fire and Ice at some point, hopefully earlier in the year. We're going to have the Rio 2016 Olympic game. We're going to have, obviously, the anniversary title. And then we have, according to my source, the kind of mystery fourth title. So probably at least 3 to 4 Sonic games, entering the realm this year. And I'm sure that's probably been the primary focus of all the Sega divisions. Everything's going to lead up, I think, to the next couple of months and probably then to whatever is inevitably released at the end of the year. I do think that, like we talked about, if Sega can get a steady stream of good PC ports from what they already have, I don't necessarily think you need an overabundance of titles to be successful, because if a majority of those titles don't sell for jack squat, then what's the point? I would rather have a smaller series of good quality titles that we know get good word of mouth, get good reviews, get good press, and hopefully then translate into good sales. If they can do that both on the console side, I suppose on the mobile side with Sonic, and then support that with whatever ends up in the pipeline for PCs this year and beyond, I think they're going to be fine.
I think another thing that they really need to do as well is they really need to get active again. I would love to see them actually do stuff again. They were, for the last 12 months, they really haven't done anything. I mean, they had Sonic Runners, you had mobile, and you had Sega 3D Classics, but other than that, it's been really, really quiet. And if there's one thing that really didn't help is that, even though it's understandable why they did it, it was to get all their ducks in a row again after the restructure. I really do think that it's high time that we start seeing an active Sega again. I want to see an active Sega again, even if it's even if they did just have one Sonic game, like the anniversary title. At least that's a big thing they can promote like crazy and get out there, and it's still more active than they were last year. But I definitely think Sega needs to start promoting stuff more often. Like the Boom cartoon was a missed opportunity to get some ratings, because like once Cartoon Network stopped airing the daily premieres in July, and the promotion for the cartoon just sank, ratings sank too with it. The lack of promotion killed a lot of the ratings that show could have had. But I definitely think that if Sega's to get anywhere this year with have a better year this year, they definitely need to get to promoting stuff more and get their name out there again.
Good
Okay.
point.
What I think it's basically 3 points. Like getting all three divisions together. Like it is really like painful to see like Japan acting on his side, like America acting on his side, and Europe doing its own thing. Like we really need all these three divisions to act like a single company because it affects all of them in terms of image, in terms of response from its consumers. I think they have
Yep.
to. If not, I know that their markets are entirely different, but at least like like making it seem like all is part of the same plan. You can't have like isolated efforts from everyone because it translates into really accomplishing nothing. Like example, like there's this thing that they also have to do when announcing titles. Like for example, they say, okay, we're gonna release 3D Power Drift, but it is uncertain for the West if they are going to get this game. If they start working together, like saying, okay, you guys are not getting this game this year, but you are eventually gonna get it. Like the West is like when Bandai Namco announces a game in Japan, it says it is also coming to the West. So people rest assured that the game is eventually coming. They will know that they don't have to import that game and eventually make the Western Division lose money for that, and they actually get the game when it
But a
releases in
lot
the
of
West.
people said that about Phantasy Star Online too.
Yeah, but it was like different problems with that. We all thought that it was coming out. Even Sega of America thought it was coming out here, and it never did because of God knows whatever reason. And the problem is they don't do that anymore. If they ever said like Yakuza Zero is coming to the West, maybe 2 years later, but it's coming. Like people will know and start like being confident in the company because they know they will eventually get it. They just have to wait. People will wait because they want it. So I think it is also this kind of issue. It's like, okay, we're doing these things and you are not gonna get it, or God knows if you ever will do. That is uncertain. That is uncertain, and you can't have your public being in this kind of big questioning. You want them for sure, so you have to make this kind of decisions in a way that you can assure that money. You can't be doing these things. The other thing, very important thing, is they have to stop being stubborn. They have to start being practical instead of being stubborn. For example, I will take the case of Sega Europe because these guys have been the most practical at all. The big problem is you don't have money. How do you make money? And they say, okay, we're gonna make simple things that make money and start financing the other things that will give us more money and a good reputation. So the thing is, okay, we're in a region where football is popular. We release Football Manager. That game sells. That game makes money. That game is keeping the company alive. They are practical in these things. They have to start doing these practical things so they can make the financial decisions to make other big things. And they have to, like start investigating what they are going to do. Like, for example, we see the case of Sega of America. Sonic Boom is okay. Like, supporting the thing that you invested a lot of money on is good. But the problem is, this thing is made towards United States and certain parts of Europe. It doesn't speak to the rest of the countries you are in charge of. So decide if you want to push for better for the United States as a region and abandon the other things, and then do it. But do it. Take that decision. Don't just like do things in the middle. And the other thing is like, if you want to be practical in this area, okay, who's your bigger audience? We know that Brazil has the bigger audience. So why don't you make some efforts to get that market again? Because it will give you more money than actually Mexico and United States combined together. So I think they have to make this kind of analysis and see what they really want, but decide in a proper way and start doing it. And
Yeah,
I think,
it's. No, go ahead.
yeah, go ahead, Sudoni.
No, I'm just gonna say, like, yeah, I totally agree. They need to stop saying and start acting because we've already heard, what they had to say about matters in a few interviews now. We're like, oh, we want to do this and we want to regain the fans' trust again. Well, we need to see that first, and that's going to be what everyone's going to be paying attention to is what's Sega going to do, not what they're going to say. And I know all of us really do want to see Sega have a great year, and especially after such a calm year last year. This is going to be. I'm expecting a very, very busy year. Like,
yes, I think the last point we should be addressing is getting your good marketing and good PR right. Like, within Sega Europe is doing right with this new guy, which is Dan Sheridan. He's doing a great, great job. Adam Weber is doing so well for Sonic. We need them to properly advertise their thing, like getting the right people to know what the games are about and start promoting that. Especially if you're going to dig into Sega's past, like getting to start studying what's about all these games, because that's a point where they have been lacking in the past years. Like, most of these people were like, there's this Japanese Zing game that we don't know what it is, but here it is, buy it. They have to start training these people right.
yeah,
And I think it's how you sell things that actually can make you more money.
Well, I think Sega of America's community team has been doing a really good job of that, especially if you look at the 3D Classics. They've been doing lots of interviews. They've been multi-part interviews that have been having a lot of great information. I think they've done a lot of good work to try to be able to do some of that. One of the things I'm going to, going back to Sonic, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what Sega ends up doing with Sonic Boom Fire and Ice, because it's going to be really interesting. And if it is another failure, I don't know what Sega's going to do with Sonic Boom going forward if they continue to keep investing in that IP, or if they just abandon it completely. But if they're able to be successful with it, that's going to be huge for them. One of the things I would like to see, as my son climbs on me.
Hello.
Well, one of the things I would love to see them do with Sonic Boom is to take on the personality of the animated show. I think it's great. I think if kids who are fans of the series, the TV series, pick up that game and play it, and they recognize the style, the tone, the writing, and everything else from the TV show, if they can equate that, I think it'll be a really good thing, rather than just being a completely separate feeling experience, if you know what I mean. Basically, like the first Sonic Boom games were, they didn't really have that much to do with the show as far as how the characters interacted and things like that. I don't think that they captured the TV show that much, and the TV show, out of all of the Sonic Boom things that came out of that, I think is the best as far as the quality goes. So
I think it is urgent. They need to sort Sonic Boom to start becoming successful, because they already invested a lot of money in it, and the problem is that this type of franchise will buy you time to make other games from the regular Sonic thing. So it is quite of a tricky and problematic thing. They must get it right.
yeah.
Yeah, I've noticed they spend more and more time working on Sonic games now, because like if what we've been hearing from Tristan sources any indicator, and they've been working on the anniversary game since like before Lost World, that's been a while.
It's been probably 3 or 4 years.
Here's another thing. They're also working on this Sonic movie they announced a while ago, so maybe most of those strategies will also have to do something with it.
I would be concerned if most of the strategy surrounds the Sonic movie, just because I just have to consider how you have to mass market something like that. Think along the lines of, I don't know, Alvin and the Chipmunks, and how they absolutely wrecked that franchise for people like me who grew up with like 80s Alvin and the Chipmunks.
I hate Alvin and the Chipmunks now. I like the first movie. The first movie I can stand. I cannot even
and like
stand
the
to see
Smurfs.
any of
Like the Smurfs in the 80s, fantastic. The Smurfs now, utter crap. So that's... I would be a little concerned, and I have no information to suggest one way or the other. Doing a movie is a very complex process, and a lot can go wrong in it.
What about Gem? That was another good
Gem,
example.
did Gem even was Gem even released in wide theaters? I know it got released and it got awful reviews, but
I don't think they may not have had a wide release on it just because of how bad it did in its limited run.
I would be concerned if they're putting all their chips into this Sonic movie. I hope that is not the case. I hope if that is the case, they're saving that for like next year and not this year. But we can only hope. I'm hoping the 25th they kind of treat like the 20th, and it's more for like trying to reel back the classic fans in while opening the opportunities for the more modern and more current fans. That would be an ideal situation.
We could have Sonic the game based on the movie based on the game. That would be like the most meta thing they've ever done.
I want the movie out of it. The movie can wait till 2017.
Here's a question I don't remember. Is Sony involved in this live-action movie?
That was announced in. I want to say the movie was announced in 2014.
It was,
and, who is in it? I want to say.
Was that
Barza.
separate from the Universal deal that they signed?
No, the Universal deal that supposedly is going on has more to do with Golden Axe. But I think the Sonic one was done with Sony, with Marsa Studio.
So it is. So it is a separate deal because Universal signed with Golden Axe, I think, Altered Beast, and maybe Streets of Rage, and so it's a separate deal. It sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay, so let's go on to our last topic, and this is going to be an interesting
knowing
one.
that Sony.
Okay. Sorry, I have my son out here banging on the walls. So, but all right. So now we know that obviously Sega didn't go to E3 last year, and whether you want to believe the fact that it was due to them relocating their headquarters or just simply because they didn't have a whole lot to show, whatever the case may be, we fully expect them to attend this year's E3 because why wouldn't they, right? They're done moving. They have nothing else going on, right? So they'll be at the show. Hopefully they'll be even closer, depending. I'm not sure if they're actually closer to LA now or not. But anyway, so let's assume they're going to be there. What do you want to see them announce or show there the most?
I would love to see
Star Online 2. They must.
I can only imagine how the reaction would be if they announced that Phantasy Star.
Uh-oh.
I'm sorry, what's going on?
I don't know what's going on.
They must announce it. It is like the last chance they got for that game.
Yeah, I got up to shut the door and I came out back and no one was saying anything. So, all right, I'll go ahead and go first then. I don't know if what was going on, but one of the things that I want to see, apart from what we've kind of discussed so far, is I want Sega to announce that Valkyria Chronicles Remastered and Valkyria as a Revolution is going to be coming west, and hopefully be able to be released in 2016 as well. I think, looking at the success that Valkyria Chronicles got when they released it on Steam, I think that shows that there is an avid fan base for Valkyria Chronicles that will support a bigger release, and I would love to see that HD remaster come to the PS4 and possibly even to the PC. But it just looks so good, everything I've seen from it. I want another reason to get back into Valkyria Chronicles again, and I just that even the original one still holds up well today. But if you look at the trailers from Valkyria Chronicles Remaster, it just looks so good. It's also going to ship with a battle demo for Valkyria as a Revolution. So if we could get that earlier in the year, or maybe even close to when E3's happening, that would be great. Be able to whet our appetite for As a Revolution and get back into Valkyria Chronicles. It's going to get the name back out there, leading up to the bigger release, which would be As a Revolution, hopefully towards the end of the year. I think that would be a great thing to do, and that's going to be a big release for Sega, and hopefully a big IP going forward that they'll continue to be able to churn out year after year.
Let's hope they do. I'm really eager to see that game over here.
So Donnie, do you have what would you say would be a game that you would like to see Sega either announce at E3?
I would love to see, it may be a little bit of a stretch. Like even if they like did announce this, it might be a little bit of a stretch to make a big deal about it at E3. But I'd love to see another Knights game. I'd love to see another Knights game, not just because of the fact that this is technically Knights' 20th anniversary this year, but I think Knights is due for a new game. I think it's high time to go back to that franchise and see what they can work with now. I mean, I don't expect like the best game ever, but I'd like to see something. Yeah.
It would be interesting if they did that, if they would be willing to work with Yuji Naka again, because obviously he had just released Rodea, which is, if you've played the game, it is very Knights-esque. Right. It's very similar to Knights. So it'd be interesting to see what that game would look like if they were able to go back and revisit that. That's a very good choice.
Well, they have been working with Yuji Naka recently in a lot of other projects, so maybe we can see Yuji on Sonic again or something related to it.
I think, first off, if we're talking about things I want to see announced, I would like Sega to follow through on their word and prove me wrong and bring Phantasy Star Online to the West.
Yeah, I'm on it too. The game needs to be out. Like this is the last
delayed, guys.
Right. I mean, it's pretty much now or never for a Western release of PSO2 because
if they ever make
content.
If they ever make an announcement trailer, it should start with the phrase 4 years in the making of this translation.
No, it should just have my name, Tristan, plus a giant middle finger. No. And as to what I think we actually will see at E3, I think a little dabbling of Atlas, a little dabbling of maybe some of the other stuff, maybe Valkyria. I think it will be almost all Sonic.
We'll see a booth again. I think that's a definite. We'll see a booth again.
Absolutely.
They didn't even have a booth last year, so I mean...
Nope.
It would be nice to see that again. I miss the tours. Because they always had like a video up after E3 or like not long after it has started where they have like a whole video touring the booth and stuff. I miss those.
What if they surprised everybody with a like a new Sonic racing game? That would be something.
I'd be fine with like a successor to ASR. I loved ASR.
Didn't Steve Lysett say at one point that Sumo was interested in at some point in doing another All Stars racing game if Sega was up for it?
I think they even said made like kind of mention
a fighting game.
A fighting game was one.
Yeah, I remember a fighting game. I would love kind of a Fighters Megamix Redux.
Good God,
that would be
so awesome.
That would be, and in fact, I think we're coming up to 20 years since that was released too. Give or take maybe
so
one or two.
There's so many of these anniversaries, I can't keep up with them all.
I mean, you could have. I mean, they've obviously seen some success with Project X Zone in Japan with all the crossovers with the various franchises. I mean, we have a rich IP of Virtua Fighter and Fighting Vipers and Last Bronx, and they could if they
Axel
really wanted to. Yeah, they could do that. They could do Streets of Rage if they really wanted to, and really kind of like. Really wanted to change it up a little bit. That was a fun game just because, any game that will let you fight as the Daytona stock car, the Hornet, you could tell that even though the end result wasn't that ideal, they put a lot of love into it, and I would love to see something like that again.
One of the things that you got to hand it to Sumo is they're not afraid of looking at who's the biggest and baddest game in this certain genre, and they take it head on. Name and point. Taking on Mario Kart with the Sonic Racing franchise, and in some ways doing it even better. And so it would be interesting to see if they did in fact go for a fighting game if they looked at Smash Brothers and said, you know what, we're going to show Nintendo that we can do a Smash Brothers style game with Sega characters and do it better. And wow, how awesome would that be?
I don't even think it has to be like Smash Brothers. Smash Brothers is Smash Brothers. Just have it be the same arcade style that Sega basically perfected with Virtua Fighter. This doesn't have to be hard. You can have extra modes and stuff, but don't have it be like a Smash Brothers clone, because then that's what people are going to call it. They're going to call it a Smash Brothers clone, even if it's necessarily better. That was I think one of the very big obstacles that ASR kind of had to overcome over both of its titles, is just the constant comparisons to Mario Kart, even though I do think it did the genre better in some respects than Mario Kart did. The last thing I think, we're talking about marketing and PR and all that jazz. I think the last thing anybody wants is, all this pushback about, well, is it going to be like Smash Brothers? No, I want it to be like classic Sega, beat 'em up, insert coin, give me the life left at the top bar, give me a time thing on top, and let's go to town.
If anything, that what they have to ensure they do is make it something that the fighting game community is going to want to latch onto. They need to make it a game where it's tournament worthy, where they're going to latch onto it, and it's going to be something that you see playing in fighting tournaments across the country and across the world. That is really what makes or breaks a lot of these fighting games nowadays. If you can make something that's very competitive and things like that, then chances are that game's going to be successful. It's going to have an instant community involved in it, and so whether it's a Smash Brothers style game, whether it's more of a traditional straight up arcade style game like you want, I think to make it a very competitive game for the fighting game community, cater to that style of game, I think that would be a smart way to do it. So.
And suddenly Sega releases Eternal Champions new version.
Oh my God. So, I think it's gonna wrap it up, guys.
Yep.
Does anyone have any? Do we have any last minute things you want to get out there before we end the show?
I just want some good games.
We're done.
That's all I want. I just want good games.
I will plug one thing. TSZ is launching something new either next week or the week after. So.
Of course, I know what it is. So.
Donnie knows what it is, but the rest of you don't.
Uh-oh. Yep. That sounds exciting. So look forward to that.
No, it's not in the source, by the way. Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. Maybe
the source on that is me.
And you're not anonymous.
I am not anonymous. This is my real face.
That's right. Okay, so as always, follow us on Facebook and Twitter. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/SegaNerds. Twitter is at SEGA Nerds. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. We're on iTunes. We're on Stitcher. You can also, if you just check out the sidebar, we have some handy links down there where it makes it very easy to subscribe to the show. And as obviously, just go to www.seganerds.com to find the website. TSSZnews.com is where you can find them. Excellent source of news all the time. You guys do a very, very good job. Do you guys want to plug any Twitter, anything like that, Donnie? Where can people find you?
People can find me at SSF1991. That Twitter that seems to be competing with the official Sonic account now in terms of memes. But you can find TSSZ's Twitter.
And also, at TSSZ News. And we passed 2,500 followers today.
Oh,
awesome! Congratulations.
What a coincidence.
Yes.
It's going to be funny. We will all have to come back again this time next year to look back on some of the predictions we made, to see how well Tristan's source came through, but most importantly, to see if Donnie has been able to hold on to his sanity after writing for all these different video game websites currently on board with. So that's I think going to be the story of 2016.
Yeah, I'll get back to you whenever I am when this year is out, because it's like I said on Twitter, like on yesterday when the new year happened. we're in for a hell of a ride coming up. I mean, even without Sonic's anniversary, there's gonna be a lot. I'm sure Sega's gonna be coming out like big time with all their titles and stuff. Because with the whole year now where they've been able to build stuff up, we're gonna be seeing it all get unleashed upon us in the next 12 months. So.
That's right. And Tristan, be sure to keep your beeper handy because whenever there is some bad Sega news coming, we will be calling you and have some discussion. So, but no, seriously, I love having you on, Tristan. I think you give a great rundown.
Insight.
And can just I think you break down any bit of Sega news or any topic very well, and I always enjoy having you on. So, thanks again for coming.
Of course, no problem.
All right, we will be back next week to start looking forward, and hopefully we'll have some new Sega news coming out. So we will be back next week. Everyone have a good week. Take it easy.
Take care.